The fear of so-called maximum or full employment seems to go back to your discipline. In other words, if there's lots of jobs, if the unemployed is small, then your ability to discipline your workers is reduced because they know that can get another job if you fire them. So
you need a reserve army of the unemployed, as they used to say.
Right, but that means that capitalism as a system seems to require having in this country, big enough in this country, to have millions of people necessarily sitting idle.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because one of the things I think that really thwarts us in our work is the idea that this is a very small number of people are unemployed, and they're probably, not very good or able to work or something like that. And if you want to really push a social problem, you have to really have magnitude. You have to say it affects a lot of people and it's severe in its consequences. And actually both are true. And since unemployment statistics change every month, you'll excuse me if I go to a note, but actually this 3.6% unemployment, which is so very low as official unemployment, is really just the tip of the iceberg, to use a very original expression. But it means that 5.9 million people are officially unemployed. Now, 6 million people is not nothing at all, but that's really low unemployment. And low official unemployment. And that means that these are people who are working at all during a week that they're actually interviewed. It is part of a large survey that the Department of Labor conducts. And it doesn't matter how long they're employed or whatever, but just so they're employed during the week, or maybe working in a family business a certain number of hours. But actually, and so that's the 3.6% unemployment, but it doesn't count a number twice that size, actually, because you take people who are part-time for economic reasons. That means that they'd like to work full-time, but they can't get a job. Now, there are some people who are involuntarily part-time unemployed, and actually they're probably not so voluntary anyway, because they might actually lack child care or they might lack transportation. But anyway, another 4.2 million people added to that 5.9 are these people who are part-time for economic reasons, part-time unemployed.
Which means not only that they don't have the job they want,
but they don't have the income.
But they don't have the income, which pinches their family's resources.
Absolutely. And then there are another 4.9 million people who are job wanters. They're not actively looking. In order to be unemployed, I forgot to say this, you have to say, I've actively looked for work. These are people who would like a job if it came along, but they're not actively looking. And it could be that they are also discouraged. But that's another 4.9 million. So instead of 5.9 million, this 3.6%, you've got 15 million people. And I might say, too, that if you take even the official unemployment numbers, they're not equally distributed among the population. Whites are 3.1% unemployed, blacks 6.0%, usually about twice as much. The gap is narrowed a little bit. And if you take teenagers, young people who are starting their working life, you've got something like 12%, and black teenagers, 22%. And then, of course, we also look at job vacancy rates. We've got 2.3 people looking for every available job, who want jobs, I'm sorry. And then, of course, we have this whole thing of the number of people who work year-round full-time for less than the 4-person poverty standard. And that's actually only about $25,000 a year. So we really need full employment to fill this gap.